Hello and welcome to my how to draw a flower video. So in this video I will be showing you how to draw flowers. As you will see that I choose more of a freestyle method instead of a geometric method where people draw shapes and they convert it into a picture. The reason why I chose that method is because I really have difficulty converting shapes into pictures. I can draw basic shapes and convert them into picture, but when I try to go more in depth, it ends up looking more mechanical for me. It doesn't look as naturalistic as I would want it to look, and this picture is not gonna look 3D, it's gonna be 2D. Like I was saying, the reason why I chose a more freestyle approach is because for me the freestyle approach, I'm comfortable with it. It allows me to make mistakes. It allows me to change my mistakes, convert my mistakes, and make them part of the artwork, and that's why I prefer that. But I would say if you have difficulty with proportions, definitely a geometric approach would be better. But because you cannot rely on drawing shapes because they're very time consuming, either way you're going to have to learn how to freestyle. So that is why I chose the freestyle approach. And like I said, this is going to be a 2D picture. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open a blank canvas, and I'm going to change the color of the canvas to something more beige color, a lightish beige color, because I do not like drawing on pure white paper if I'm using the computer screen, because it really makes my eyes hurt. So I end up changing the paper into a beige color. So as you can see, I'm going to start drawing lines, and for me it's more about looking at a picture and finding patterns. This picture, though, I'm going to draw off head. First things first that I did when I was learning to draw flowers, I would look at patterns on the flower. I would look at the lines, and so I would really look at the picture closely, and I would try to figure out if where each line starts and where each line ends, and if any line reminds me of any sort of shape, then I would try to just draw that shape on the paper. And I really focus more on adding the details when I start my shading instead of at the beginning, because I figured that whenever I try to add details in the beginning, I always end up very confused and frustrated. So I always wait to add detail at the end of my sketch, after I've finished sketching everything. So I think the focus is not for my drawing. The focus, especially for beginners, it should never be on perfection. And I think even nature is not perfect. In fact, what makes nature itself is that nature is very spontaneous, very chaotic, and I think you should just treat your artwork as obviously as a canvas where you can just add and improve on your mistakes. Perfection is just something very hard to achieve. Whenever I made a mistake, instead of erasing and redrawing over and over until I get it right, I would just allow my mistake to become part of the art. And when I come to shading, I will incorporate the mistake into the art. And so as you can see, initially when I first started drawing, it didn't look exactly like a flower. It looked like a cartoonish drawing of a flower. Instead of fixing it and erasing it to make it look like a flower before I started, I just left it and allowed it to become part of the artwork. So when you make a mistake, don't allow that to discourage you. Just continue on, and you'll see a mistake can end up becoming a mistake can end up really becoming a beautiful part of your artwork. It could end up really bringing out a unique aspect of your artwork. So the most important thing is shading, and the first thing you should do when shading is choose where my light source is gonna be from. My light source, I usually like to take the light source from the top left hand side, because in my house most of the time that's where the light source is from, either that or from the center top. But I used to have difficulty pinpointing where the light source is from. So if you have a difficulty pinpointing where the light source is, just look at something and figure out which part of it is the brightest. Whichever part of it is the brightest, that is where the light source is coming from. And then just like that, when you're going to shade, you add more lights to the area you add more light colors to the area that light source is coming from, and you add darker colors to the area that are opposite to the light source. For example, obviously the bottom of the plant is not getting much light, so that one is going to have darker colors, and like also the crevices and like any sort of space that light might not be able to enter will also get darker colors. For example, in between the petals will get darker color, then on top of the petals they will get lighter colors. So as you can see, I have started shading already, and you would have noticed now that at the edges of each of the petals I am putting dark colors. And the reason why I'm doing that is because the petals, when they are on the flower, they cast a shadow onto the petals beneath them. So in order for me to portray that, I put darker colors underneath the petal to portray the shadow of the petal from the top, the shadow that it's casting. Next thing I'm gonna do is change the background color. after putting the proper background color, I'm gonna move to the next picture. But as you can see on the last picture, it kind of really skipped into the background already being drawn, and the reason being my computer actually stopped recording while I was drawing and I had no clue. And so I'm going to see if my computer actually, the Clip Studio, the time lapse, if I can incorporate the time lapse that I pressed on, if I could incorporate it so you could see the end, how it ended up looking. Hello, so this is the Clip Studio time lapse. I managed to record it. I didn't think I had, but I actually did, so here it is. I hope you see the final result. So the next drawing is going to be a drawing about the calla lily, and as you have already seen, I drew a rectangle, and the reason why I drew a rectangle is to help me with proportion. But I don't do anything more than that because, like I said before, I do have difficulty with geometry, drawing geometrical shapes and then trying to convert them into an image. But the basic thing is that I do spot out a pattern and I use it to help me draw. I just don't go too deep. And as you can see now, I applied a base color, a grayish base color, and that is because I generally do not like working on a white background, and white backgrounds are very hard to blend. So as a beginner, I think one thing you should take note of is don't start blending on a purely white background. So as you can see, I've already started putting in the shading, and chose my light source, and the light source I chose for this flower would be from the top. And like I'm gonna say again before, and just like before, the most important part of shading is figuring out where the source of light is shining on your picture, and then making the places that are in direct contact with the source of light the lightest part of your picture, and the places that are not in direct contact with your light source, the darker part. And my light source is going to be from the top center of the picture. The calla lily is very simple. It has only one leaf petal, which I think is good for beginners. As you can see, if you're going to do shading, choose one color on the color wheel and try to use the colors in the color wheel to shade, because using colors that are very different, that are vastly different from each other, ends up being harder to blend than choosing colors that are very close to each other on the color wheel. The next thing I want you to notice is not just the light source, how it shines on the flower, but I also want you to see how I am adding shading to the outside of the flower and to the surrounding. And also that is something you should also add to your picture, because it really helps with the overall tone of the picture and the shading of the flower itself. You don't always have to go for a realistic, naturalistic approach to drawing things, but I tend to go more that way because that's how my art style is. Calla lily, I think, is a very easy flower to draw, especially for beginners. I think if you want to draw a flower, you should begin with the more simple drawings of flowers. And the reason why I say this is because drawing the more simple things will give you more confidence and will help you develop more motivation for drawing, and from that you'll practice more, and by practicing you're going to develop a quick way of spotting proper lighting. If you become very good at spotting where the light hits a object, it'll be so easy for you to improve your it'll be very easy for you to improve your shading, and will make your picture, this will make your picture more realistic looking. And that's why I would say start drawing with the more easy flowers. But I really like using Clip Studio to draw, because before I did used to use pencil and paper, and I tend to be, like I said, very spontaneous, and I had to make a lot of changes, and that wasn't very convenient on paper because it was harder to erase, because it always left a little mark no matter how light I drew. And also, if you look at with Clip Studio, you can always erase as much as you want. You can and the blending tools are much easier to use, unlike real life. They require less effort, and the airbrush tool, I think, is very, very convenient, because that is not something you have in real life. It allows you to add colors. You can reduce the opacity and the hardness, and only add a slight tinge, which is extremely hard to do on normal drawings. So this is the airbrush tool, this one, and as you can see, there's quite a wide selection of airbrush tools. There's the soft one, there's the spray, the droplet, the noise, the running. I like using all of them. Even all of them, I've used the noise one, the running color spray. I think I've even went on to the add sub tool. This button is, when you press on it, you can go to let me just press on it. You can go to materials on asset, and there you can find a wide range of brushes. Even some of them are airbrush tools, some you have to buy, but there's a good amount of free ones. And I use a lot of these. I use a lot of the asset tools to incorporate things into my drawing. As you can see, these are some of the ones that I have already downloaded. And so it was only after I was done talking that I noticed that it actually didn't record the rest of the video about me showing you my remaining brushes that I downloaded from the asset from Clip Studio, and I'm sorry about that. Clip Studio has a lot of buttons, and each button has its function, and I think that is actually very convenient, because you get a wide range of tools and materials to work with. And whatever you cannot find, you can go to the add sub tool button, which is this one, and there you can go to the assets and search for materials there. Those at the asset area, you can find free and non-free materials, ones that you have to pay, and even the ones that are paid. generally they have they're quite cheap, but even if you just decide to stick on the free, even if you decide to stick to using only free materials, you will definitely not be disappointed, because there is a wide range of materials to use. So with the airbrush tool, like I was saying, it's very convenient for drawing because of the so much options it gives on the airbrush tool is very convenient, and it's very good, especially for beginners, because it really helps you with
my
shading.
next drawing is going to be that of the magnolia flower, and I'm going to use my usual freestyle technique. So my usual technique is to draw lines and then to start shading those lines. As you can see, I did draw the lines like shapes, circular, and a bit of with a bit of pointed ends to some of the shapes, and slowly I started redrawing the shapes, and then I'll begin with adding shading onto it. I think really when you draw lines, you don't have to actually when you draw lines, you don't have to worry about the lines being correctly drawn, because you can easily fix that with shading, as you can see me doing it now. And while you shade, any kind of squiggle or any kind of speck or any kind of mistake can easily be blended over. And like I said before, mistakes can add to your drawing, so don't really focus on the mistakes. And see how easily I erased all those unnecessary lines. So now that I'm done with drawing, I'm going to do the blending. And as you notice, when I was trying to fill in the leaf, there was some space, and that is because of the vector. I did put a vector layer on top of my flower, and I forgot, and I drew with another color on the vector layer, so it's not allowing me. And that was easily fixed by me merging the vector layer on top with the one at the bottom. What's the use of the vector layer? The vector layer is used to put on top of your initial drawing, so that you don't end up making a mistake that will affect the drawing at the bottom. So it's like kind of like a protection mechanism. Now that I have, as you can see, I've already started blending it in, and like before, I chose a light source, and I am using my normal light source, which is from the top left. And I'm not gonna put too much detail into the blending, because I'm not planning on making it 3D. I'm leaving it at 2D. Now you can see I started drawing the center of the flower, and I used the copy and paste button to copy and paste a piece of my drawing, and I'm gonna continue using it also. So now that I've finished drawing the top part of the middle of the flower, I'm gonna highlight it again, and then I'm gonna copy it and use that to cover the rest of the tiny pulp of the flower, so I don't have to waste time. Here it is, I'm doing it now. This is very convenient. And remember, when you press copy and paste, you have to press the scale button, or it's not going to allow you to move the drawing you want to copy onto the surface you want to paste it on. And remember, I told you when it comes to shading, when you are going to shade a place that is like a crevice where that isn't getting much light, you have to add more shade and make it darker. Even if you're not planning on making your drawing 3D, shading is still important to make your drawing look realistic. As I was saying before, adding lights and darks is very important in a picture, because as you can see, the more lights I add, the better it looks, and the more darks I add likewise, the better it looks. But it's not just about adding light here and dark here. Like I said before, you have to pinpoint the source of light, which I chose my source of light to be from the top left. And then I begin shading that way. What that means is that the light will be shining on the flower from the top left hand corner of the flower, so everything from that side is going to be significantly lighter than the opposite, which is the right bottom side of the picture, which I'm going to make sure to add more dark color to. And this will really add to the picture, not just to make it realistic, because obviously this is not going to be a 3D picture, but because naturally everything has a light source, because if it's complete darkness, you cannot see anything. Imagine a room where there's no light, nothing, it's just pitch darkness, you cannot see anything. That's why in order for your picture to look normal, you have to figure out where you're gonna stage your you're gonna have to figure out where the source of your light is gonna come from. I'm sure you have noticed that I started putting dark colors under the leaf, and that is because of the shade that the top leaf casts under that is because the shade that the top leaf casts on top of the leaf at the bottom. So the thing about drawing is, even if you're not trying to make your drawing 3D, you have to make it as normal as possible, and anything normal has a shadow and has a part of it that is bright. So likewise, a picture of a flower has to have a place that is bright and has to have a place that has a shadow casted on it. And you're gonna see from how I add light colors like white on top of the leaf, and how I add brown at the bottom. And the reason why I'm adding brown instead of black is because brown is closer to, in the color wheel, to gray than black is. I know it sounds weird, but that's true, because if you add colors that are significantly different from each other, it's going to be hard to blend, and it's going to make your picture look odd, even if you're not trying to make it 3D. So all the colors that I've been using to each other have been relatively close, and as you can see, I used grays, whites and light brown to make my picture look more normal. Even at the edge of the flower, I added a bit of color to not only add not only to make it look normal, but also to add texture, I guess you could say that. The important thing about drawing flower is not actually making it look realistic, is making the flower look believable, making it look as much as
close to a flower as possible. And I know I just said it's not about making it realistic, but when people try to make things realistic, they make it exactly the same as a normal flower would be. But it doesn't have to look like a normal flower, it just has to have aspects that normal flower has. That is like a shadow, that is like a light where the light hits on the flower. Does that, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I'm trying to say.
And I think you probably have noticed that I did not start my picture on a purely white background, and that is because really white background provides a huge contrast, and it's very hard to blend things on a white background. And at the end, I'm gonna change the background several times because I was having difficulty trying to figure out which one looked better, and I wasn't sure whether it's the yellow or a light blue, but I think I'm very happy with the end result.